Okay, welcome everybody to a live wire on discipleship. So there are going to be various live wires on discipleship. This one is about the basic, what is discipleship, why does discipleship work, and how do we disciple. There's going to be other ones where we're looking at skills of discipleship, like how do you ask questions and how do we tell stories. There are going to be others about how we actually implement discipleship into the structure of a church or a business or wherever it is. But for now, we're going to ask the question, what is discipleship? So let's turn to the book of Matthew. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." So when Jesus says, go and make disciples, what does he actually mean? I believe that when we miss his context, we often miss his point. So to give you an understanding of the problem, let me show you a little photo from many years ago. This is from when my wife and I got married. You can probably tell the decade. This was in the 80s. And Lynn and I came from very different backgrounds. I came from a male-dominated background, so I never taught to girls till I was about 16, because the schools I went to were either all boys schools or the boys and the girls were separated from school. It was a conservative environment. There was no drama in our house. Nobody ever shouted. Nobody ever raised their voice. It was very calm and very conservative as well. When I met Lynn, she came from an all-female family. It was her and her three sisters and her mother. Everything was always hot in the house. It was always cold in my house. There was lots of talking. It was very noisy. There was arguments. People were throwing cabbages at each other. It was craziness. And it was very, very liberal. Nobody told anybody what they should or shouldn't do. So when I met Lynn and said, "Lynn, will you marry me?" and proposed marriage, if you can imagine some different thought bubbles, the thought bubble in my head was different to hers. So I said, "Lynn, will you do this?" And she eventually, after too much time in my opinion, said, "Yes, I'll do this." But we agreed to two completely different things. 2,000 years ago, Jesus said, "Go and make disciples." And today, we as a church are saying, absolutely, we'll make disciples. But I believe we're agreeing to something different from what Jesus meant. And we're going to unpack that in this session. So the way we're going to do that is looking at Jesus' context. Jesus did not invent discipleship, he adopted it. We'll look at why later on. But he adopted it, and we're going to look at the teaching on discipleship that's recorded from those times to help us understand what was discipleship. So I'm going to read from the Talmud and from the Mishnah. If you get the book, Talmudim, How to Disciple Anyone and Anything, it gives you the source backgrounds. But for now, I'm just going to read some of these things to you. Your father brings you into the world, but your rabbi brings you into the world to come. One of the things we need to understand is that rabbis saw their disciples like children. And some of them were very young. They were usually teenagers for a start. So there's this father-son or parent-child relationship. The second thing, if a man's father and rabbi are both taken captive, a disciple should ransom his rabbi first, and then another. If his father and rabbi are carrying heavy burdens, he removes first that of his master and afterwards that of his father. Another interesting fact is that if a disciple went into exile, there's some recordings saying that rabbis should pursue them and go with them. So you've got this really strong bond that's seen even greater than a parent-child relationship. Your relationship with your rabbi was important. Why? Because they brought them into the world to come, which is the Jewish way of basically saying what we would call heaven. All acts a slave performs for his master, a disciple performs for his rabbi, except untying the sandal. I don't know if that kind of brings up any thoughts to you, but of course it reminds us of when John said, I'm not even worthy to untie his sandal. And I always used to think, well, this was some kind of random just thing that John came up with. I'm not even worthy of, I don't know, untying his sandal, but actually he's referencing this. He's saying the one thing a disciple doesn't have to do for their rabbi, I'm not even worthy to do that. And then another interesting phrase that's used here is it was described as discipleship is a painful existence. So why? Why would you exist like that? Why would you enter into a relationship with a rabbi where you had to serve them, where you had to look after them, where you had to wash their feet, where you had to go ahead of them and prepare a place for them? And when you stayed with the rabbi always got the best bed and you got wherever you could sleep. It was a painful existence. Why would you do that? Because the rabbi was going to show you what it was like to live life the way God wanted you to live life. And that was so valuable to people, they would enter into that relationship. But perhaps the one I find most amusing is this. It says that a man could follow a rabbi for up to 30 days without permission from his wife. Now, why does it say that? Because essentially, Ray Vander Laan says this: rabbis had students and rabbis had disciples. A student would follow a rabbi around and they would, go and, they're speaking here, they're speaking there, I'm going to listen to them, I'm going to take some notes, and I'll adopt whichever bit I think is good, and maybe I'll have a different rabbi that I'll follow or go and hear next week. Fantastic. That's a student. It's basically what we do. But a disciple was someone who followed the rabbi to become like the rabbi. Ray Vander Laan says, a student wanted to know what the rabbi knew, but a disciple wanted to be who the rabbi was. And so a young man is in the field one day, and the rabbi comes through, and he thinks, I just love this rabbi. I want to be like this rabbi. I'm going to drop everything I do, and I'm going to follow this rabbi. And that was okay, according to Jewish law, for up to 30 days. He could down tools, stop his job, stop bringing income. He could go and follow. But after 30 days, he had to check with his wife and get his wife's permission, apparently. And I can imagine Lynn saying to me, if I said I'm going to go and do that, she would probably say to me, sure, you can go and follow your boyfriend if you want to. I could just imagine that. So this really strong relationship. Have you noticed, though, how much of this is about going on a journey together? It's not static. The idea of a discipleship class is an oxymoron. Two words that don't go together, a bit like Microsoft Works. It's those two things that don't really fit. And Jesus completely condones this relationship. So if you listen to some of the things that are said in the Bible, look at what Jesus says. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble. Now, some Messianic scholars believe he's actually talking about the disciples there, because they were young, they were little, they were like children. The oldest was probably, we think, Peter, who was 20 years old. Jesus goes on to say other things like this. Jesus told his disciples, anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He also says, a student is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. So there's this idea of a servant-master relationship, because they're getting so much. I'm being shown how to live life according to the way of the Torah. And of course, Peter says, we left everything to follow you. It's a big deal. So there's a journey going on. And there are 3 or 4 principles I think we can pull out of this just really quickly. The first one is that discipleship is backwards. So I have a question, and my question is this. Why is it that we educate people and hope they go on an experience when Jesus took people on an experience that led to education? We've got it backwards. So what happens is we operate like travel agents. You go into a travel agent and someone will pick out a brochure and say to you, hey, go to Paris. If you go to Paris, here are some pictures of Paris. I've heard Paris is great. We can tell you how to get to Paris. You can book it through us. That's a travel agent. We do that with the Bible, don't we? Here's the Bible. Here's what it says. You should go and do this. I've heard it's a wonderful thing if you go and do this. Or you have a tour guide. A tour guide says, I'm in Paris. Come with me. I'm going through Paris. I'll take you, and as we go along, I'll point things out to you, and you'll have questions, and I'll answer them for you. Importantly, experience makes people itchy. Experience, when people take people on experience, they become itchy, and when they become itchy, they ask questions. So rather than us pushing information onto people, discipleship allows us, or allows people to pull that information from us. A second thing for us to, I think, learn is that discipleship is holistic. It's more than just coaching. It's more than just mentoring. It's more than just counseling. It's all these things together. It's a lifestyle. It's including somebody in your journey. Thirdly, discipleship is inclusive. It's not left there just for very special people. Discipleship's not, well, people, when you get to a certain level, you can then disciple people. If you're one step further than someone in something, you can disciple them. If you know how to pray and somebody doesn't know how to pray yet, if you know how to read the Bible, if you know how to find things in the Bible and people don't know how to do that, if you know how to share your faith and somebody doesn't know how to share their faith, if you're one step ahead, you can do this. If you're male, if you're female, if you're young or old, on Pais we have young people, 13 and 14-year-olds, discipling other people. You can do this because it is, of course, inclusive. And I think that's really exciting, at least to me, is that everybody can be involved. You just have to be one step ahead. Number 4, discipleship asks questions. Now, before I explain this, let me just explain one more thing. One of the reasons I think discipleship can be perceived as not inclusive or people don't disciple is they think, well, who am I to disciple someone else? Well, the reality is, if you're one step ahead, it's fine. But the other thing is, disciples learn from each other. You know, I disciple people, but I learn from them, maybe not quite as much, but quite a lot. So even though I'm discipling someone, and even though they're learning a lot from me, I'm still learning from them. So I could create a discipleship relationship with you where I say, I'm one step ahead of you in this area, can I disciple you in this? But you're one step ahead of me in this area, maybe you can disciple me on this. I think that's important when we're trying to inject discipleship into our culture, is to help people understand that, because otherwise people back away. So let me go back to this 4th point. Discipleship asks questions. And there are 3 questions that I want to ask you, and in a moment we're going to collaborate. The first question is this. What? What are you doing to advance the kingdom of God? What is it you're doing? So on the drive a few minutes ago, I was driving to do this presentation, and as I was driving down the road, there was a man there with a big sign saying, "Need prayer." That's what he's doing. He's out on the streets, asking people to stop their cars, and he's praying for people. That's what he does. What do? It might be inside church, it might be outside church. But what is the thing you do? What's the primary mission? What's the primary main thing you do to advance the kingdom of God? And then secondly, how do you do it? What is your gift? What is your talents? What is the ability that you have that's natural or you've learnt? Where is that gifting? Now, I want to say something that normally upsets people, and not everybody agrees with this, but I firmly believe this, is that your gifting is nothing more than nuance. It's just nuance. That's all it is. Jesus never really talks about it. People say to me, oh, what about the parable of the talents? Well, the parable of the talents wasn't about talent as in ability, just happens to be the same name. It was about money, but really it was about faithfulness. It was about character. Jesus is not interested that much in your gifting, apart from the context, I believe, of when it's advancing the kingdom of God. So when your gifting is used in discipleship, it becomes even more effective. So I'm not saying it's not important at all. I'm saying what Jesus focused on is discipleship and advancing the kingdom of God. How does our gifting fit in that? So what are you doing to advance the kingdom of God, and how are you doing it? What is that gifting you have? Now maybe you think, well, I don't have much of a gifting. Maybe you're not doing anything to advance the kingdom of God. If I was in your shoes doing that, I would say, well, just volunteer somewhere. Get involved. And then notice one of 2 things. Notice what feedback people are giving you. Oh, you're really good at doing this. Or you're really good at that. And notice the fruit. What's the fruit of what you're doing? when you do those things, what gives most fruit? What seems to help people get closer to Jesus? So what are you doing? How are you doing it? And then, of course, who are you doing it with? Who are you doing that with? So I think in the church today, we have a lot of people who are doing something. We have a massive emphasis on how we do things, our ministry gift. But in a Christian-centric gospel, it's about God fulfilling your ministry gift. You do things because they fulfill your ministry gift. In a kingdom-centric gospel, a kingdom-centric religion, we understand that actually our ministry gift is here for the purpose of God's kingdom. So the gifts God's given me, he hasn't really given me, he's given you. If I have a teaching gift, that's not for me, it's for you. It's not to make me feel good, it's for you. If you have a worship leading gift, that's not for you, it's for me. You help me lead worship, or you help me enter into worship. So what, how, and who? What are you doing? How are you doing it? And who are you doing it with? Okay, so now we're going to go into our collaboration. And I'd like you to look at those three things. So in our collaboration, what we do is we download the documents, and then we discuss the questions, and then we disciple others in what we've learned.
Hi, we hope that you enjoyed this episode of Livewire. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, I'd like to recommend mypais.com, where you can find more episodes on this subject.